I play Rick Grimes, and he's an Atlanta cop from Atlanta, Georgia, in the south of America. He's married with a young boy, and you meet him at the beginning of the show, and before the apocalypse, and he gets shot. He wakes up from a coma to find himself confronted with a zombie apocalypse, as you do. When I came with a preconceived idea about what the show was going to be, and then I read the pilot episodes, and I was surprised, and that's very rare in my job. I've been working sadly for 16 years now, and the cracks are beginning to show, but no, it was an amazing experience, because I found it thrilling, which you kind of expect from this genre. I found it exciting, I found it witty and funny, but the most surprising thing was that it was very moving, and that was the reason why there's a very small human contact. There's a scene when Rick first meets another human in the show, and that was the scene that made me want to do it. I'm totally convinced, and I keep saying this, that the only reason I got the gig is because my son had just been born and I hadn't slept for 12 days, and I looked like I'd literally been in a zombie apocalypse. So I'm sure that they whisked it off and they went, dude, man, this guy looks like he's living it. But it was Frank, really. Frank obviously must have seen something that he kind of thought was his interpretation of Rick. And then we spoke for a long time. He Skyped me before I got on the plane for the screen test, and a lot of things he spoke about really I agreed with, and I felt when I read the pilot and it was very exciting to work with someone so experienced and so brilliant that kind of had the same sort of instincts for who he wanted and I wanted to play.
I play Laurie Grimes. She is Rick's wife and Carl's mom, which is the two most significant parts of her identity to her. What attracted me to it, on the one hand, I've never played a wife and a mom, and Laurie is an utterly intuitive woman. This is someone, nobody ever took Laurie aside and said, you're a smart girl, you ought to go to college and think about being a lawyer. She's just a very grounded, intuitive woman who I don't think really ever looked particularly hard at her life and had like angst over what do I want to do, what are my dreams. She just, she born in a town, went to high school there, fell in love with Rick, married him, had a kid. They're living in the same place. And so I think just at the point that we meet her, she's starting to kind of feel like that life that she just sort of ended up in without making too many conscious choices isn't suiting her real well. It doesn't fit real well. And so she and Rick are having a lot of trouble. And I think the simple sense of what's gone wrong between Rick and Laurie is that he's hurt by her words and she's hurt by his silences, and they've known each other so long they've stopped apologizing. And were it not for the end of the world, I don't really think they'd be married in a year. And so ironically, maybe the zombies saved their marriage.
I got out sort of a couple of weeks, 3 weeks early before rehearsals, just to get a sense of the place, because I'd never been to the south of America, let alone Atlanta. So, and then worked with a dialect coach who was terrific and worked very hard, and then stayed in dialect for the whole shoot. So, it was initially quite a strange experience, because you have to filter. You feel like you're about an inch behind who you really are, but then you kind of catch up, and by practicing it becomes the norm. And so a lot of the people on set were freaked out when they heard me speak like this. They were like, man, what are you doing, that stupid accent? That's terrible. It was a really, really liberating and exciting and enjoyable experience, and a great honor to have so much screen time with this character who's complicated and radically different from anyone I've ever played before in my career. I'm not a geek. I'm not a big, and a geek is in this genre a big compliment. If you're a geek, that means you're a big fan. Frank, I mean, when we arrived in Atlanta, we got a zombie survival kit, which was actually an Atlanta survival kit because it's so flipping hot there. I'm serious. That was brutal filming it. It was all outdoors in Atlanta heat and humidity. But yeah, I knew the Romeros. I knew the Romero movies. I loved them. But I'd seen 28 Days Later, but that's not necessarily a zombie film per se. That's more predatory, that's more a viral kind of film. I think what we're trying to make is very much, because Greg Nicotero is obviously the original zombie creator, the artistic, special effects designer, was on our show as well. And he is extraordinary, a true artist. I think that because of that team and Frank's knowledge and love of those genre, I think he was paying homage much more to the Romero zombie. So it's more of an atmosphere rather than a predatory monster.
I don't really have an interest in zombies, which is to say they scare the living daylights out of me. And I've never seen a zombie movie, and I never read a comic book, so I'm a natural for this. But Frank, first of all, Frank Darabont is Frank Darabont, and I think he's one of the master storytellers, and I think his films have a level of compassion to them that I just absolutely love. Compassion for all kinds of horrible things, and he actually manages to pull off at some level compassion for zombies in this thing, which is an unbelievable feat. One I don't think most people would even want to try. AMC, I think, are some of the only people who could do this show. Because if you're going to do it, you've got to go all the way. At no point can you say, we should be cautious, this should look pretty, we don't want to offend anyone. You've really just got to commit and say, this is a story about a hideous world where even good people do depraved things, and then they have to pay for them, and they're all hot and sweaty, and go from there. So we did. The gloves can come off with AMC in a way that you just can't in a network, and you're far less hamstrung creatively. And the word no is the quickest way to squash anything creative, and we don't hear no a whole lot. Getting to know AMC, I mean, you don't necessarily start a job thinking the suits are going to become my friend. Getting to know these folks, I understand why they're doing some of the best television in the world. They are 201 really brave, really intelligent, really creative people. And before I was working for them, I thought, how do you come up with Mad Men? Where does Breaking Bad come from? I know them now, and I go, oh, well, that's where. I mean, they're great, and they're neck deep with us. I think it's just polite to the rest of the world to include everyone in the party and not sort of say that for whatever reason, because you're not in the United States, you just have to wait outside for a little while. So it makes good sense. It's obviously a great way to combat piracy. As a performer, it also means that there's a very good chance that everybody who sees this show will see it on television, the way we meant it to be seen, and that it's not going to be some third-rate piece of shit, pirated, grainy, downloading thing. Because I care about this enough that I want people to see what we did. I want people to see Frank Darabont's direction. Not, forgive me, this makes me mad, but not some asshole with an iPhone in the middle of a screening room who's burning a third-rate DVD that's going to skip every 5 minutes. Because that thing you skipped, I worked really hard that day, and I want you to see it.
I hope people respond to the zombie apocalypse in the same way I did when I read the script, is that I was surprised, and perhaps they will think one thing when they start watching the show, and hopefully by the end of watching the show they'll feel another thing. And it's rare to get that. I'd never read anything like this, and I was concerned about how we would fulfill what I read in the pilot. But every day I would go to work the sets, the scale of the show, the detail that we put into the show, and exceeded my expectations, and that in itself is a dream come true. I just found it an incredibly exciting adventure. It was more of an experience than a job, this role for me. So all of this is just a bonus. I'm just so pleased that so many people are so excited about it, because we put everything into it.